So Princess Charlotte was supposed to sit in this one specific chair at a state banquet, and Camilla sat in it, and the way that got corrected tells you basically everything about where the power actually sits in that family right now. Not where it looks like it sits, where it actually sits, because the gold place cards had been arranged for weeks. Every single seat at that state banquet had been assigned through a process that takes longer than most people realize. Protocol officers, household staff, senior advisors, they spend days finalizing the exact order. Who sits nearest to which foreign dignitary, which royals anchor the most visible sections of the table, and where the children of the future king are positioned to signal their emerging place within the line of succession. Nothing at a state banquet is accidental, and nothing is more deliberately chosen than where a child belonging to the future of the monarchy will sit. Princess Charlotte's chair had been decided, her name was on the card, her position had been confirmed. Then Camilla sat down in it, and what happened next was not explosive. There were no raised voices before the guests arrived, no dramatic scene that filled the room with embarrassment. What happened was quieter than that, and in many ways far more powerful. King Charles intervened first, William followed, and the correction that unfolded in those compressed, tension-filled minutes before the banquet began would ripple through the palace long after the evening ended. But to understand why this moment carried such weight, you need to understand what a state banquet actually is, who Charlotte is within the royal family's future, and why the chair she was assigned to sit in was never simply a chair. Before I get into all of it, though, if you're new here, this is Crown Watch, and we break down royal stories exactly like this one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Okay, let's get into it. A state banquet, in plain terms, is one of the most formal events the British monarchy hosts. It's held at Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle when a foreign head of state visits the United Kingdom, and it brings together senior royals, political leaders, ambassadors, and invited guests for a dinner of extraordinary ceremony. The seating arrangement at a state banquet is not a courtesy. It is a statement. It reflects hierarchy. It reflects relationships between nations and within the royal family itself. It reflects who is being positioned as central to the monarchy's identity. The preparation for a single state banquet involves hundreds of hours of coordinated effort. The master of the household oversees a team that handles everything from the positioning of crystal glassware to the precise angle of flower arrangements that have sometimes taken professional florists days to assemble. The table itself, often seating well over 100 guests, is set with a mathematical precision that would feel excessive in any other context. But this is not any other context. This is a room where the image of Britain, its monarchy, and its relationships with the world are constructed and presented simultaneously. Every detail is load-bearing. The place cards are part of that precision. They're not printed the night before. They're decided through consultation, revised through negotiation, and finalized only after sign-off from the most senior levels of the household. When a name appears on a gold card at a specific position, it is the result of deliberate choices made by people whose entire professional expertise is the management of royal meaning. To displace a card, even momentarily, even without intent, is to disturb something that was authored with far more care than the disturbance deserves. Charlotte's card had been placed, her seat had been designed. Now, Charlotte's placement at an event like this had meaning beyond her age. She is a Princess of Wales, the only daughter of the future king, and fourth in line to the throne. Her inclusion at a state banquet was itself a signal that the Wales children are being formally introduced into the visible architecture of royal duty. That matters because royal visibility is built through repetition. A child who attends, who sits, who is seen in the right places over years is a child whose public identity is being shaped deliberately and carefully. Within the monarchy, children do not simply grow into their roles. Their roles are constructed around them through a series of carefully sequenced public appearances, each one building on the last, each one adding another layer to the identity that history will eventually record. Charlotte's presence at this state banquet was one of those layers. It was not her first formal royal appearance, but it was one of her most significant. A state banquet carries a weight that a garden party or a charity walkabout does not. It places a royal figure inside the machinery of statecraft, inside the relationship between Britain and the rest of the world, inside a room that foreign heads of state will remember and that diplomats will analyze long after the evening ends. Her chair was not a small gesture. It was a beginning. There's also the matter of what Charlotte represents to the public. She has, from her earliest appearances, generated a depth of affection in Britain that reflects something real about how the country sees the Wales family's future. She carries herself with a composure that surprises people who expect children to be unpredictable at formal occasions. And that composure has itself become part of her public identity, evidence of the parenting behind it, evidence of the preparation, evidence that William and Catherine have been building something in their children that will endure. The state banquet seat was an extension of that building project. It was the monarchy saying, in the wordless language of placement and protocol, this child belongs here. So when Camilla, the queen, lowered herself into that seat, apparently without noticing, or perhaps while the final preparations were still being arranged, the household staff who saw it understood the complication immediately. They could not correct the queen themselves. That's not how the palace works. The correction would have to come from above. It came from Charles first. The king was already in the reception room when a member of household staff approached and spoke quietly to him. The conversation lasted less than a minute. Charles moved without hurry, without any visible shift in his expression that would alert the guests already filtering into the surrounding space. The king walked toward the banquet table and reached the section where Camilla sat with the composed confidence of someone who had not yet looked at the place cards. What Charles said is not fully known outside the room, but those nearby described his tone as controlled and careful, the voice of a man who had spent decades navigating corrections inside this family without allowing the correction to become a spectacle. He spoke to Camilla briefly. She looked down at the card, and the realization of where she had placed herself moved across her expression in a way that was impossible to miss for anyone watching closely. She did not move immediately, and that pause, short as it was, is what caused William to step forward. To understand the significance of that pause, you need to understand how these moments work inside the royal family. A correction delivered by a king to his queen is not the same as a correction between equals. It carries the full weight of institutional authority. When Camilla did not immediately rise, she was not defying Charles. She was processing. She was in that brief window, absorbing the full meaning of what had happened and what rising from the chair would represent. In the royal world, the act of vacating a seat that belonged to another person is itself a public statement. It acknowledges the displacement, it confirms the correction, and it does so in front of staff, in front of the people whose job is to remember exactly these kinds of details. The pause lasted only seconds, but in a room with that much silent attention trained on the moment, seconds carry the weight of minutes. William had been making his way along the reception line when the situation reached him. He had not seen it happen in real time. He had been told about it by one of the household coordinators whose responsibility included managing the final seating check before guests were formally seated. William's response, by the accounts of those present, was immediate. He did not wait to see whether the situation would resolve itself. The Prince of Wales is protective of his children's public roles in a way that goes beyond ordinary parental instinct. He and Catherine have made deliberate choices about how slowly Charlotte, George, and Louis are introduced into royal duty. Every appearance is considered. Every public role is intentional. The state banquet seat was not a casual inclusion. It was a step in the plan, and the moment that step was placed at risk, William moved. He arrived at the table with the same controlled composure Charles had used, but with something harder beneath it. Those who have watched William in moments of private tension describe a stillness in him that is more unsettling than anger would be. He does not raise his voice in environments like this. He does not need to. The weight of what he is, the future king, the father, the man most directly responsible for protecting the public identity of his children, carries the correction before he says a single word. He addressed the situation calmly. He made Charlotte's placement clear, and with Charles already having spoken, Camilla rose from the chair. The speed with which William moved after being informed is itself significant. He had options. He could have allowed Charles, who had already initiated the correction, to complete it without adding his own presence to the moment. The situation was being handled. Protocol was being restored. A reasonable man might have stayed where he was and trusted the process to conclude without his intervention, William chose not to do that. And that choice tells you everything about how seriously he takes the construction of his children's public identity. He needed to be present at the correction. He needed Charlotte's seat to be defended not only by the king, but by her father. Because the message those two presences sent together, Charles and William, the reigning monarch and the future one, united in the same moment of correction, was categorically different from the message one of them alone would have sent. Together they said, "This is not negotiable." Together they said, "This child's place within this institution is protected at the highest level." Together they said, "The gold card with her name on it is not a suggestion that can be set aside while someone more senior gets comfortable." You might be wondering why this matters as much as it does. Why a chair at a dinner, even a state banquet, carries enough significance to warrant this level of attention. The answer lies in what royal seating actually communicates. Every placement at an event like this is studied by historians, journalists, royal observers, and foreign delegations. The position a person occupies at the table carries information about their standing, their future, and the family's priorities. When a child of the future king is placed at a certain position, it says something about the monarchy's direction. When another senior royal occupies that position instead, even briefly, it creates a different picture. And in a world where images of state banquets are published globally, where every visible arrangement is interpreted, the photograph taken before the correction was made would have told a story that was not the one the palace intended. Consider what the photograph would have shown without the correction. Camilla seated in the position designated for Charlotte, the Wales children's introduction to the ceremonial heart of the monarchy subtly disrupted, a visual record, permanent, shareable, analyzable, of the Queen occupying the space that had been designated for the future king's daughter. Royal observers would have noticed, historians would have filed it, and inside the palace, it would have become the kind of detail that resurfaces in every subsequent conversation about the balance between the Camilla side of the family and the Wales side. The chair was not just a chair. It was a statement about Charlotte's place in the monarchy's future, and that statement had been carefully authored by people whose job is to think about exactly this kind of meaning. Camilla sitting in it, whatever the reason, threatened to reauthor it. The history between these two sides of the royal family is long and documented and doesn't need to be rehearsed in full here. But context matters for understanding why this particular moment detonated with such force inside the palace. Catherine and Camilla have always existed in an uneasy parallel. Both are women who entered the royal family through marriages that redefined the institution. Both have worked to establish public identities that go beyond their relationship to the men beside them. Both carry the weight of public scrutiny in ways that are relentless and unforgiving. And both have, at various points, found themselves in competition for something the royal family only grants in limited quantities: visibility. Visibility inside the monarchy is never random. It is protected, contested, and assigned. It decides who is seen as central to the institution's future and who exists at its edges. When William blocked Camilla's speech at the National Portrait Gallery event, defending Catherine's earned cultural patronage against what he saw as an intrusion, that incident did not resolve the underlying tension. It drew a clearer boundary. It told everyone inside the palace what the Prince of Wales would and would not accept. This state banquet moment arrived in that same context. And so when Camilla sat in Charlotte's chair, even if unintentionally, even if the oversight was genuine, it landed inside a family that was already carrying the bruises of earlier confrontations. Good intentions are complicated when the pattern around them keeps repeating. The palace does not evaluate individual incidents in isolation. It evaluates them as part of a sequence. And this sequence had been building for longer than most of the guests at that state banquet realized. What made this moment different from previous tensions was the involvement of a child. The disputes between Catherine and Camilla over public visibility, over speaking roles and event prominence, had always been contests between adult women navigating a complicated institution. Charlotte is not part of that contest. She is a child being prepared for a life she did not choose, being introduced into public duty at an age when most children are thinking about nothing more consequential than what to have for lunch. Her inclusion in the state banquet was the result of her parents' careful, loving, deliberate planning. To have that planning disrupted, even accidentally, by the same dynamic that had already caused friction in other settings was something William could not absorb quietly. Camilla, by all accounts, had not planned this. The people who know her best describe the moment as a genuine confusion of placement, the kind that happens in large, complex events where dozens of staff members are managing hundreds of details. She is not by nature a woman who schemes her way into children's chairs at state occasions. She is disciplined, experienced, and deeply aware of how these events work. But intention does not erase consequence inside the royal family. It never has. The consequence here was that the correction had to happen publicly enough for the household staff and others in the room to witness it. That means the story of what happened did not stay contained to the three principals involved. It moved through the palace the way these things always move, through this small, efficient network of staff and advisors who are present at every critical moment and who carry what they see into the corridors afterward. The distinction between accident and pattern is one that royal observers have long grappled with in covering this family. A single incident can be dismissed as coincidence. Two incidents become a question. Three become a conversation that the palace can no longer manage through careful press statements. The National Portrait Gallery speech, the state banquet chair, these are two data points in a sequence. Whether the individual actions were deliberate matters less in the end than what the accumulation of them communicates to the people inside the institution who are responsible for managing its long-term stability. There's also a subtler dimension worth examining. The palace's internal culture is one where unspoken signals carry as much weight as direct instructions. Senior royals do not typically announce their intentions before acting on them. They move, and the movement itself becomes the message. Staff read those movements with the precision of people whose careers depend on reading them correctly. When Camilla sat in Charlotte's chair, every person in that room who noticed, and several did, began performing the same rapid calculation. Was this an accident, or was it a test of what would be allowed? The answer, delivered swiftly by Charles and William, settled that calculation permanently. Charles understood this. William understood it more acutely, and the speed and unity of their response was, in part, a response not just to this incident, but to the pattern it was in danger of extending.